Good morning, all. If anyone is watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told, I had a voice radio. So today, I am answering one of the most popular questions pretty much I've ever been asked since I started doing all these videos. I've been bombarded lately with people saying to me, Ross, what do I do now that Versus Seeker is being rotated? I've never played in a format without Versus Seeker. What do I do? And I thought, you know what? Rather than respond to all of these messages with a nice long copy and paste response, let's make a video. So the issue here is that the rotation has been announced, and as of the 1st of September, we're losing a bunch of sets, including Roaring Skies, which means we will no longer have Versus Seeker. Versus Seeker is an incredibly powerful card that allows you to grab any supporter out of your discard pile. Want to draw more cards? Grab a Professor Sycamore. Want to get rid of your opponent's energy? Grab a Team Flare Grunt. Want to give your opponent fewer cards in their hand? That's what N comes in. And if you want to just grab a Pokemon off the bench to try and KO, might I suggest Lysander? And the way people have been playing over the last few years is been with this conscious knowledge that we can always just use Versus Seeker. And this is a way we've been playing. Use an Ultra Ball, discard a couple of cards, and in the early game, you would just discard supporters. Because if you had 2 Lysander in your deck, you had 2 outs to draw a Lysander. But if you had 1 Lysander in your deck, 1 in your discard, and then 4 Versus Seeker in your deck, you would go from having 1 out to drawing your Lysander to 5 outs to drawing your Lysander by discarding it. So what we would do in the early game is we would use Ultra Ball and deliberately discard our supporters, especially our tech supporters like Hex Maniac, so that we could draw into Versus Seeker more easily than them. We would also use Professor Sycamore, and we wouldn't mind if we discarded all of these supporters. That's okay. We can get them back later. But we can't do that anymore. Now, Versus Seeker has been around for a while. This print we've been using lately isn't the first time we've ever had it. It was around in the SP era, and it was generally a 1 of, maybe a 2 of. But the big difference there was we had both Uxie and Claydol, which allowed us to draw cards very, very easily. So we didn't need to be playing all of these Versus Seeker, because we weren't discarding all of these cards in the early game. We would play 1 or 2 of our tech supporters, and we could use Uxie and Claydol to draw them when we needed. That was the key. So the question is, moving forward, how are we going to cope with Versus Seeker going away? Well, I've seen a couple of options being bandied around that honestly I am not a fan of. Firstly, some people have suggested just replacing Versus Seeker with Puzzle of Time. After all, you're switching 4 Versus Seeker for 4 Puzzle of Time, and if you play 2 at the same time, you can grab 2 cards from your discard. They could be supporters. Surely it's the same thing, and the answer is no. And there's a couple reasons for this. Firstly, and in my eyes most importantly, it is not that reliable. There's none of this, it's okay, we can just draw our 1 Versus Seeker. It then turns into, it's alright, we can draw 2 Puzzle of Time at the same time. It's not going to work, ladies and gentlemen. Gonna be a pain. I'm not buying it. However, we've got the added issue here of Garbodor, and with Garbodor running around and Trash Valance, we really don't want to be playing any more items than we absolutely have to. So maybe Puzzle of Time isn't the best idea here. I just don't think it's consistent enough, although Garbodor is something to bear in mind. The other option I've heard people bandy about is a Random Receiver, but Random Receiver doesn't do what we want it to do. We want to recover so that we can reuse our supporters. Well, that's not the same thing. Random Receiver helps you to find your supporters, but it's an item, Garbodor, and also we've got Tapu Lele. Nowadays, Tapu Lele is our way to find supporters. We don't use Random Receiver. We don't need Random Receiver to do it. So the question is, what are we going to do? Now, if you happen to be playing Decidueye GX or Gardevoir GX, brilliant. You've got GX attacks that can just recover them. You're fine. For everybody else, here is, in my opinion, what we do. We play more carefully. That's the key, ladies and gentlemen. You play more carefully. In the early game, when you've got that Ultra Ball, you're not just going to be able to blindly discard a Guzma and a Team Flare Grunt, because you might need them later on. you're going to have to be much more careful about what you discard with Ultra Ball. Maybe that means more people are going to start using cards like Nest Ball, or maybe more people are going to start using things like Alolan Vulpix, although do remember Ultra Ball's still going to be your out to Tapu Lele. It might mean that in some decks, not for every deck, but in some decks you might go to more shuffle draw like N, rather than discard and draw like Professor Sycamore, because if you discard too many cards in the early game, you don't have them available for the late game. Now this isn't going to work for every deck. Something like Darkrai GX that needs Darkrai in the discard so that you can use the ability to put it on the bench and attach a Darkness from your discard to it, and also needs Darkness energy in the discard so you can attach it when you resurrect the Darkrai. They ain't going to be playing N. It's going to be Professor Sycamore all the way for that particular deck. But let's take something like, I don't know, Metagross, where you need rare candy, and you need all of your Pokemon, and you need your supporters, so maybe a deck like Metagross goes more towards something like N to preserve things like Guzma, as well as rare candy, rather than just going into Sycamore. Now, in some decks, like Persimmon springs to mind, you do want to play Puzzle of Time. But the key thing here is, Persimmon plays Puzzle of Time for a whole bunch of stuff. It plays it to get Choice Band back, it plays it to get your Rescue Stretchers back, it plays it to get your Double Colourless back. Persimmon is generally a deck where every turn you need to get either a Mew or Persimmon, whatever was just knocked out, and a Double Colourless, and maybe a Choice Band, and maybe something like a supporter as well. And in a deck like that, Puzzle of Time is way too good. But there are very few decks like that around at the moment where you're really going to need to be playing for Puzzle of Time. One of the things I think about the loss of Versus Seeker is that phrase, he needs a Lysander for the win. At the moment, it's often said he just needs a Versus Seeker for the Lysander for the win. And I believe that is just going to change to, he needs a Tapu Lele for the Guzma for the win, because remember, Lysander's going away, Guzma is coming out in its stead. That, I believe, ladies and gentlemen, is the way we're going to play. I think we may well end up playing more of our tech supporters. So whereas at the moment you might play 2 Lysander, going forward you may well play 3 Guzma. Because it's all very well and good me sitting here saying, be more careful when you play Ultra Ball, be more careful when you play Sycamore. We all know that's not always an option. Sometimes you've got to play that Ultra Ball and you've got to get rid of your supporters. Sometimes you've got to play that Sycamore. Maybe you've got an Alolan Vulpix and no other bench Pokemon. You've got to play Sycamore to draw into a bench Pokemon. So you're going to have to play that Sycamore. So you're going to have to discard some. But nowadays you need to be discarding these supporters, and you need to be doing so in the knowledge that they're not coming back. So you need to be a lot more careful about what you discard and when you discard it. The other thing is, one of the things that Versus Seeker going away is going to force us to do is really keep track of our resources better. At the moment, when you've got 2 Lysander, 4 Versus Seeker, you can get rid of a couple. It's not the end of the world. You've essentially got 6 Lysander. You're going to keep one for the late game. But nowadays, with Guzma and no Versus Seeker, it really is going to be a question of, right, I'm playing 2 or 3, how many have I got left? And there are going to be some very painful decisions. There are going to be some turns where you don't play an Ultra Ball, because you know that playing an Ultra Ball could get rid of that Guzma that you need later on to win the game. So you've got to wait a turn to play that Ultra Ball. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how I think the loss of Versus Seeker is going to be dealt with. Now, just to recap then, Random Receiver, don't like it. Puzzle of Time in some decks like Persimmon is going to be great. But in most decks, it's very, very simple. You need to include more of your tech supporters, be much more careful about what you discard, and keep track of your resources much, much better. But the thing is, and this is going to be the real challenge, it depends on the deck. Persimmon, just play Puzzle of Time. Gardevoir, don't worry about it, you can recover them using your GX attack. Darkrai, just go full bore with Sycamore, because you know what, you've got to get the discard and just hope you're not discarding too many supporters early. But things like maybe Turtonator and Metagross, maybe you do have to change things a little bit. Maybe you're playing more N and fewer Sycamore so that you can keep your resources. And that doesn't necessarily mean 4N0 Sycamore, but instead of 4 Sycamore 3N, it could mean 4N 3 Sycamore. You are going to have to change the way you build decks, ladies and gentlemen. It is going to depend on the deck, which is why I can't just give you an out-and-out answer here. But a lot of people have been asking, and I mean a lot of people have been asking me this question, so I thought it was something to address. But let me know in the comments, have I answered your question? If I haven't, if there's anything else you need to know, chuck it down in the comments. Hopefully I'll find time to get back to you. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus pods, etc., that is the reason to go to patreon.com/PTCGRadio. And by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.